What's going on, Warren? How are you?
I was so totally unprepared for that question. I don't know what I thought you were going to say to start off the episode, but of all the things you could have picked, it was not that.
Right? Just what a jerk asking someone how they are. That's yeah, oh man, I can't remember who it was. We had a I can't remember who the guest was, but I said, there's no like stump the chump or surprise questions. And my first question went to her was how she's doing, and she's like, "I thought you said there would be no trick questions."
That was Adriana. She was just on here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. So today we're going to be talking about AI ready data and AI governance. And to help us through that conversation, we have Ina Tokarev Sela from Illumex. Ina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bill. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So give us a little bit about your background and what led you to creating, because you're the CEO and founder of Illuminex or Lumex. So give us a little bit about how you got there.
It was a long pathway, but I also happy about the way that my career took me. I started in enterprise SAP, a huge German software company, and I think this is the most hidden truth about enterprise. You can actually have quite an adventure in them. You can build stuff, big stuff, right, and switch careers within. So I spent 12 years at SAP, starting as an architect and then basically evolving into a customer-facing role as a partner manager and then a head of P&L for video analytics units. So quite a journey and quite a privilege to work with the world's biggest companies. Think about Walmart, Pacific Builder, Boeing, and so on and so forth. So really watching companies onboarding to the cloud journey and then machine learning and then, neural and agentic as well. And then I continued my career to Sisense as business intelligence vendor, and then understood what an underserved segment business users actually are. After building all this analytics for all those years, you're speaking to the actual users, and some of them are CEOs of the companies, and they still cannot get their hands on the actual self-service analytics. So this has really moved me to build a company which creates a space where data could be recognized and meaningful semantically and business-wise to business users to enable them to self-serve with analytics and data access.
Right on. So whenever you're thinking about self-service data, one of the challenges I've had in the past is self-service sometimes means guiding yourself to the wrong answer. And like one specific example I have is I was working for a company. It was like, how many how many users do we have using our app each month? It's like, oh, that seems like a pretty straightforward question, right? But turns out it wasn't, because then, oh, when I meant monthly active users, I actually meant people who weren't on the trial and had converted to paid, but they were like using it at least 3 times a week, not just once a month. And so like a really relatively simple question turned out to be coming with a lot of constraints. So how do you deal with that in a self-service world?
It's a perfect question. And for starters, data has to be, at the state that you can actually create analytics on scale for many users. So when we speak about highly curated dashboards in your intelligence tool, it's no-brainer because you can massage specific data sets which go to specific report and make sure that they actually have decent quality. For companies to have self-service on scale, they need to make sure that any potential question could be answered with a high quality data. You first need to get your data in order to be able to provide this kind of service. And the second one is, as you rightly mentioned, single source of truth, right? So definition what active user is, so how many users do we have, could be defined in dozens of different ways in an organization. If you speak with someone from product department, they will go for the active user who actually, use the product. And maybe if you speak to your financial department, they will go to someone who actually signed the contract with you. So there are different ways of calculate the things. And especially for self-service, again, you're asking about things which might have different meaning. You have to have governance. And actually, understanding semantic and business definitions of business metrics and business terms.
I feel like that's a bit of a moving target from what I've seen in my experience. Like I was never in an organization where I'm like, we figured it out. We managed to get a single source of truth for even what a user is. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of identity aspects for a user, but then there's also a lot of business aspects to it. And like, how great of a customer are they? Repeat customer, how much they've spent, and then individual events related to it. And trying to get a single identity for that was always potentially a problem. And then every team in your organization has their own idea of what a user is, and probably each organization has their own user management service with its own special data. And I wonder how possible, if there is a company out there that actually has good data, or high marks on health scorecard for their data management, like, what does that look like? Is that actually, do you actually see that in practice?
So I would say, again, because we're operating in the space, so naturally it's possible. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any customers, right? On the other hand, this is truly a challenge for many organizations. And I would also say that agentic practice or generative AI creates another silo, right? So because usually data management departments that have their own single source of truth may be implemented in the data pipelines, aliases, or calculated fields, and so on and so forth. And then analytics department have their own single source of truth, which is probably in the BI tool, feature store, or metric store, what have you.
I mean, that's an interesting point, because we already see that with the public agents that are out there. They're trained up to, if we're lucky, even 6 months ago. And especially things in a business context are rolling very quickly. What the principles of the organization are, or what features need to be implemented for customers, those things are iterating very quickly. And so, this is a new problem that I actually hadn't considered before. And it means your models are fundamentally always out of date. Just like your documentation and our source code, right? It's all legacy as soon as it's made. Does RAG, resource augmented generation, help here to reduce the changing nature of those things because you can point to potentially the production data store? Or is there something else going on where that realistically you're copying that data? Is RAG being used against stale data sources anyway? Like, you're not using the production database.
It's a fair point. If RAG is a separate silo in your system and you just, keep feeding it with examples which already outdated when they're created, so no, RAG is not actually solving the problem. If you have static RAG aside, as a sidecar on data science, it will never live up to that. But if you combine metadata management, your business ontology, and use it for your agentic practice, is exactly what can be up to date at every point of time.
So the level of overhead to pull that off seems pretty significant. Everyone feels these pains, but at what point do you hit the scale or the quantity of data where it actually seems like a worthwhile exercise to implement this?
I guess it's a healthy practice for any size of organization. Unless you just want to rely on on this one developer who maintains your Snowflake or what have you, which is fine, okay. But I think like organizational knowledge and its documentation was always a challenge for any size of organization. So to me, it's a healthy habit to actually have it from starters, to have this. Knowledge graphs about your different data structures and the different data sources created from day one when you actually have data stores. But as I say, organizations which just have one database or one warehouse, a small one, would not necessarily invest in that, despite the fact that I think it's not a good practice, because right now we'll see flourish of agentic workflows where different agents going to communicate with each other, and they have to have shared context and reasoning. And the shared context and reasoning is exactly this knowledge which you should document about your organization, right? So we become more automated, and this is also business differentiation between companies. Like, if you actually advanced in keeping your knowledge and building agents around that, or you're not.
Are there out of the box agents to help with this, or is it completely built custom for everyone?
I don't think it's feasible to really, make this deployment manual for any size of organization, because, data is exploding even for smaller companies. We got this approach of actually predefining ontologies for different verticals and different lines of business, and then automated way to sample metadata from different data sources to understand what the specific logic changes for different systems, and basically automatically create this business ontology. But I must say, to your previous points, what we discovered in this automated onboarding, which is like few hours to few days, is that there are many conflicts of definitions. You might not aware about that now, but you have 10 different views in your Power BI tool where you have the same metric defined in different ways based on different data sources. And this is what we discover.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see it going horribly wrong asking your technical people about the quality of the data.
No, I mean, we're all technical people, but yeah, I guess if you want to have a business logic, let's say all those agents which automate customer support and so on and so forth, to be automated on top of your data, they should be aligned to some organizational knowledge, which is not necessarily on technical size, it's on operational size. The side, sorry, it's coming from those departments, not
Right.
from us technical people.
Maybe to make this a little bit more concrete, do you have like some canonical examples of what businesses are trying to often answer with the storage of their data?
So I would say, again, there is no business case solid for automation as agentic, as all those data copilots and agentic and automation workflows, because if you do not aspire to automation, why would you sort out your data? Or why would you sort out your governance, right? So if you don't have automation, like this is a killer use case. But when you have this killer use case, usually companies tend to start with more like a knowledge center and discovery. So basically search, right? Or all these customer support functions. On one side, on the other side, we also have like companies in pharma, for example, who already building the digital health platforms with agents. We have customers in financial services industry, which implemented self-service quotation for third-party brokers. So basically, the use case would be always shortening the time and increasing conversion rates. So there are always business-oriented metrics for implementing those use cases in the first place. But internal use cases first, and then external customer facing first.
I'm just thinking back to all the times that I was working at companies and they were saying how valuable their data would be and collected everything, just waste and storage and building up internal tables of just garbage from years and years back. And realistically, I'm still waiting for the point where we could be utilizing tools to even evaluate that effectively, because is there something to this? Is there a scenario where it's like, oh no, actually, this probably highly useless data does turn around and solve a critical need for the company today with the advent of agents that can potentially utilize it in a much more effective way than humans can, or shortly down the road, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I believe so, because most of organizational data is unutilized, as you mentioned. So I see that even most advanced companies use mainly 20 to 30% of their data on, relatively frequent cadence, and the rest is unutilized basically. And for that, data AI readiness also means that you actually understand few of the health core components. For starters, if it's duplicated, if it's used, and if it's used by which applications, and if it's sensitive, right? So we understand also the risk factors as well. And then last but not least, I think it's even the most important one, is what is the semantic meaning of that? What's actually hidden in this data? Right. And then that's why knowledge graphs become handy, because knowledge graphs, they create those suggested connections, say, oh, did you know that additional feature of your conversion score might come from this customer demographics parameter, like such and such, right? So it's kind of giving you related data, which you might not encounter so far, like by your experience, but it's in there. The thing is, in there right now is not covered. So companies usually do not index or catalog data which is not used actively for applications, again, because cataloging was used for compliance and insurance, so to say, for governance. And now cataloging is more, or we should use cataloging indexing to actually for discovery. discovery, semantic mapping, risk mapping, and risk management. And of course, it's also, by definition, agents are better than humans to understand those relations on scale, and also like on scale, and then they see humans us as moderators.
So you mentioned like 20 to 30% of the data is being utilized, so 70% is not utilized. Is that because of the lack of value in it, lack of it being categorized effectively? Is there another bucket that I'm missing here? There could be something interesting in it, but no one's taken the time to actually understand it. Because I get the sense that the agents aren't going to be able to just see this uncategorized data and magically pop up an answer of how it could be valuable. There still requires a human to evaluate it and know that there is something valuable in there. How it could be utilized still has to be done by a human.
Yeah, it's a good point. So in the databases, which already have some analytics on them and so on and so forth, the role of the agent could be suggesting additional features to look at, to take into consideration. In databases where you do not have analytics at all, so for example, we have this discussion with a company which never introduced, and this is a huge company, which never introduced analytics for people's departments. There are no dashboards for people's departments. So right now they want to skip the stage of BI tools and go to self-service data copilots to actually create this analytics, to kind of skip the stage, right? So in this case, the data is super valuable. Of course, it does have to, to go through automated labeling and reconciliation and semantic definitions and all of that. And, thankfully we have tools for that now. But here is a case is you had unutilized data, not for the right reasons.
So do you find that after going through this process that companies actually have less data storage concerns? Because we talk about a single source of truth, and a lot of times I've seen where everyone claims theirs is the single source of truth, so they want their own copy, their own database servers, their own storage system, because they don't want anyone else polluting it. So after you go through this exercise, do you find that a lot of those can be decommissioned and you actually end up with less data storage overall?
It's an interesting question because single source of truth has to be virtual. So it's kind of virtual layer which connects to your operational data source, analytics data sources, and even applications, because there's lots of business logic in application side. So it's always virtualized. And then the question is, do you even need aggregating layers like warehouses?
Right.
We see this question popping up more and more. And we say, okay, so there are probably going to be stages, right? So some companies are going to reduce, companies like in IoT or manufacturing space, they might want to reduce the size of the data to some warehouse to basically have more focused use cases, right? More focused and scoped use cases, cheaper for processing, right? And some companies who might have less data will just, go without any aggregation at all. And when I'm saying less data, it's because the storage is not expensive anymore.
I mean, I feel like there's a whole systems thinking problem here, which is just because it would be better to have a single source of truth doesn't automatically make the organizations, migrate to that. I do see the XKCD article on the number of sources. I mean, it says standards, right? We have three databases with user identity, user tracking metrics data in it, and we should have one, unified answer, one perfect database that is sanitized, that is categorized correctly. And the result is now we have 4 user databases, with all the data in it. And someone's still utilizing those old ones. And to your point of storage is still getting cheaper for us, there is no justifiable, and it takes effort, human time and resources to actually decommission a database. I can see that just not being encouraged to even happen. What if there's something we missed in there that's still valuable that we could be utilizing to increase our business even by, a couple of percentage points?
So I guess it's a virtualized ontology, or virtualized knowledge graph, which can connect to many data sources and indicate which data source and which table column you need to use for specific question. To me, is something that can, with the time, help you to decommission specific data source, or even migrating, systems to new storages. And I heard this talk at Gartner last year when someone was comparing Hadoop to data lakes, so data lake houses and all of that, because if you do not have like the semantic layer, the business understanding of what's in it, this big store of data doesn't really solve your problem. So
What's the biggest driver for this? Does it typically come to you from the business side or from the technical side? Like who's
oh,
your
it's a
most
good
passionate
question.
customer?
Yeah, I think it's good news for the whole industry that everything about agentic is coming from the business side. So, and it's a good position to be in because this is where money is, right? This is where decision power is, and so on and so forth. And you don't need to explain the
Right.
technology anymore, right? You don't need to explain yourself anymore because, I think it's the same that what happened with internet and early 2000s with the dot-com boom, that business side were like super inspired to create e-commerce use cases and what have you, and that's what's happening with agentic. It's business side that's already so inspired with all capabilities of this new technology that they're actually inventing the use cases and they're building business drivers and calculations behind that. This was usually the prerogative of technical teams, right? To come up with a new technology and then find a compelling business case. And now it's the other way around. On the other hand, technical teams are struggling on the side to provide this type of service that the business aspires to because of low data quality, because of low data readiness, and because of this multiple definitions where if you connect agents to them, it's a disaster.
I mean, it really seems like there's the innovation here is a fundamental paradigm shift from having business intelligence and even data centered engineers working within organizations to completely outsource the handling of any sort of data from your production systems. Because at the end of the day, they were always sort of a bottleneck for delivering things. It used to be someone's like, I need a dashboard for this, or be able to answer the question of how, we talk about monthly active users. Well, where is that data? What does it look like? And then figure out utilizing the tools to actually build the dashboards, having the data in a single place, all that had to be solved. Whereas now, those teams don't necessarily need to be working on that anymore. The data starts in the original application. You don't want a middle layer. You want it given to companies that understand how to sanitize it, what's relevant, where the insights are, and providing an interface for those asking the questions to directly interact with the data in a understandable way, rather than looking at dashboards that are out of date or configured suboptimally, utilizing tools that just don't really work that well because there's too many degrees of freedom, too many variables, too many columns or pieces of data that all needs to be displayed depending on what you're actually looking for.
Yeah, it's a good point because a majority of our decisions are ad hoc decisions on ad hoc questions. I do believe that we'll still have space for KPIs and dashboards. Like I am starting my day with Google Analytics and Salesforce and all of that. So, but I also have like a bunch of questions which are not in those reports. And is actually change with the data, change every day, right? And I would like to have a tool which can help me with that. And for that, I think that we could be, as practitioners, like as analytics practitioners, we could be smart about it. Because if you actually get monitoring and agentic metadata analytics, you actually understand what are the interactions of users with the systems, you will come up with dashboards which are actually useful, right? Because the biggest criticism from the end user that you build like a bunch of dashboards that we didn't ask for. And now when they have this luxury of asking their questions freely, you can monitor what they're asking about, right? Asking for, and actually create analytics they actually need and, convert them to dashboards.
Now, I'm definitely more on the anti-dashboard proponent, or I guess a dashboard antagonist. Like I find there's something very like you're utilizing as a crutch and maybe a little bit lazy as far as not articulating what the challenges or the question you want answered. It's like, oh, I'll just look at a dashboard of this information. Maybe the answer will pop up, where what you really want to do is say, why am I looking at the dashboard? What am I really looking for? And have the answer to your question. You don't care that the number of monthly active users that is increasing over time, but maybe you're utilizing that to figure out, well, where are the biggest jumps? Why was there a jump here and there? And so the question you want to ask is, where are the biggest jumps and what what happened in my organization or to our customers or our competitors or in the global market that caused the biggest change in the last 6 months. And rather than looking at a graph that says that based on the underlying data, you're getting the answer straight away, and then you can actually take the next step. And I guess one of the reasons I'm such a dashboard antagonist, I just coined that term right now, is I mean, we focus a lot on high availability systems and high reliability. You can't know that you can't rely on a dashboard for telling you if your system is up or down. Like you need to know deterministically what the answer is at any single moment. And I think the only difference is from a business is it's more long term, although I think a lot of companies delude themselves into thinking that it can be a short term answer, that I can just look at this right now and automatically know what my next step is that I should take. And it's a lot more, I feel like, deep dive into really understanding the correlations between the underlying data stores.
Yeah, I think dashboards is the way that you can tell the story, like in coherent way, like from usually from the experience, right? And when you just asking questions, using your Slack or Teams, it could be random questions without a context and without continuation. It could be like just sporadic questions, right? So in dashboard, usually when they build right, the best ones, right? Not all of them. You actually have a phenomenon, right? A measure, and then a bunch of widgets that explain like where it's coming from, like segmentation and audiences and so forth. So basically, it's a good way to visualize changes. But again, this is the way that also doesn't allow you to recognize new things. It might be a new factor that affecting what's in your dashboard, and you will never know that because it's not automatically recognized and popping up. Whereas when you use agentic, you can know, okay, what are all the factors with influencing this spike, and then you will actually see like what are the related features which can affect, right? So yeah, to your point, to me, dashboard is a good starting point. It's not an end point, but a starting point where you can actually start your exploration going further. Everything is going to be data driven, and you don't have to have, like myself, 50 different tabs open in your browser, and this might affecting this upload speed. Yeah,
Just 15.
Those are rookie numbers.
yeah. Yeah, so I guess we'll not have to use so many applications for everything and learning all those applications. It's about experience. I have a question, I have a task, I want to complete that, and I don't really care which applications and data is involved, right?
She's so optimistic.
You don't think 5 years is realistic?
I think that because of competition, there will always, and the segmenting of data, availability of data in the market, like there's no public internet anymore. We've already seen the closing off of available data sources. Every single one of these applications is going to have access to just smaller pieces of data that are more focused, and you're still going to have to go from app to app to get these questions answered. And I think some companies are trying to push forward some way of still having like a single pane of glass to interact through, utilizing MCP, the Model Context Protocol, or A2A, agent to agent. Thank you, Google, for coming up with something different. And even that, we can't even standardize on a single paradigm for a protocol to communicate between agents. So I think we failed up to this point, in the year 2025 for humans to have one agreed upon answer. I just don't see it happening unless fundamentally your daily driver changes. And I know on the software engineering side, we try to make it be the IDE of choice. But even that still, like, I don't think everyone is spending all of their time just in that one tool. You're still switching back and forth to different communication tools and whatnot.
No, I'm just thinking like everyone's in favor of a single pane of glass as long as I'm the provider of the single pane of glass.
I think that sort of maybe brings into question the raison d'être, like, of the existence of the company. Like, what are they doing that is fundamental? Like, what is it that they're really trying to sell? And I feel like a lot of companies out there, they just copy each other. Like, they're not creating something unique there. So I still see there always being an opportunity to own the data and sell it. And I think maybe this goes back to the question of, if you're not providing something unique, then other companies can spin up and still own the data. And why not? You pay some company to provide you with the answers to questions and manage all the data. And I think this has been a model that has existed in certain areas with like user research groups, for instance. think tanks, consulting companies that come and tell you how to just do your business exactly what the data should be and everything. So I don't know, like even if in your own company you have a lot of data and you're like, we know how to utilize this data most effectively, we can go and hire an engineering team to go create that single pane of glass. Eventually you're like, well, other companies could use that pane of glass too. We'll start selling it. And then that company becomes just the seller of a pane of glass. So, that cycle is just going to keep on going. But it really does bring up to the point where if another company can answer all of your business questions for you, what is there left to still be able to do uniquely?
So every organization has their own proprietary data based on the nature of business and the customer base. And even someone comes and says, okay, right now we are going to bring you industry standards about how to make business. You'll still customize it to what you already have. Like this is your advantage on one side. On the other side, yeah, if you have very special data and you want to sell it, you might want to sell it in machine readable format, which is not reverse engineered, right? So you do not sell data by tables, like by kilos, right? So, but you sell your data as in semantic embeddings. So basically as machine readable format, so other algorithms or agents can use it, but they cannot decipher that, right? I think it's actually a more secure way, right, to share your data for specific use.
Speaking of which, what are the security concerns that you deal with whenever you have an agent that has access to all of these different data sources?
So we, in our organization, we actually choose to separate data values from data concepts from agents. So agents only have access to data concepts, and then when the query is generated, it runs in separate environment on the data values, and Illumex does not ever touch data values of our customers. We just display it in the customer's applications. So we have total separation between agents and the data values themselves. So this approach actually allows you not to be concerned about data leakage or anything like that. I think every company will decide for themselves if on-premise deployment is the right choice. I would never actually vote for that because models advancing so fast and you have limited capability to upgrade them if you go for the on-premise deployment rather than just using APIs, which always go forward and so on and so forth. But everyone will make their choices again based on sensitivity and proprietary nature of the data. It's probably going to be level same way that we have cloud storage with on-premise and different governance practices. It's going to be the same for agentic. Right now, it's more and more transparency about what's moving where, and more recognition about from the company side, like what's critical and what's sensitive for them to basically send to third parties or what could be kept inside.
I really like that perspective. If it was ever true in the past where you could be profitable with an on-prem data center storing all your data and running all your compute, that must be less and less true every day. And you'd have to be doing something very special for you to find value in that, because technology is iterating even faster now, right? Like any argument you would have had in the past is now no longer valuable. And so like, I'm totally with you. I don't understand even 10 years ago how people were justifying on-prem solutions. And now it's like even less of the case.
It's cost prohibitive to move data to AI. You need to bring AI to data. And if your data is on premise, it means you need to bring AI on premise. And this is like, complicated and not very efficient way to deal with things. But, you make your decision based on risk management, I guess.
The AWS has the snowmobile that you just transfer get the USB sticks on a giant truck and, fly it to the data center. And, I think that can work out. I mean, I think if anything now, it's less about, like, it must be less about the amount of data you have and the rate of data creation. And I can see that with the number of, in a manufacturing plant or in healthcare, like the number of sensors increasing all the time. I'm wearing one here and I'm thinking about getting another one, and they're just going to increase more and more. And so with that increase, you need to be able to handle it much more effectively. I think storage costs coming down at the cloud providers is probably the next innovation that will happen there. We just saw AWS's S3 one zone drastically reduced by like 85% cost there. And I think we'll continue to see that as storage costs decrease over time. So it would just become more and more feasible to put data in the cloud closer to
Yeah.
the agents.
Yeah, processing is always a bigger concern than storage for many, many years now. And I think this is also something that many of us in the news line, what it was like last month, 2 months ago about DeepSeek. So how much will it cost to actually train model? We actually have it in inference running. So the costs of processing is shifting from training to use of the models to the inference itself. And that's why I see that a majority of funds is going to be spent actually using agentic on the data. And again, if it's more efficient on the cloud, on data centers, I would say it's going to be more efficient in the cloud because, especially if you're not locked into specific provider, there's going to be more and more competition on that. And especially when you can recognize what data is garbage and what's not, and kind of limit the footprints. So everything, all the costs are going to be down. I think right now we spent lots of money already on the data pipelines, which are duplicated to each other and not always feeding information that we actually use an application, but because companies do not monitor their metadata, they don't know what's in use and what's not. Right, so we already have like lots of spend, which is predefined, and you pay it anyhow. If you use your dashboards, if you use applications, if you are not, you're still paying the for data pipelines that you have. So agentic might replace this habit by actually invoking information and processing that you use and not which is predefined for you by someone assumption.
This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think we're going to look back decades from now and say that making storage costs so inexpensive was the worst mistake we ever made.
I mean, it's Jevons paradox, right? I mean, anything that we don't want to have, we should not make more efficient because we will eventually overutilize that thing. Yeah, I mean, it happened in, I think, really the industrial age, in especially England with coal mining. Yeah, I mean, for sure. People are already utilizing storage systems in, I'd say, abusing ways. Cloud providers have to have a strategy for dynamically swapping out hard drives as they fail because we haven't improved the reliability of them, just the
quantity.
Yeah, right. And that's sort of a problem. I mean, I think it's a science fiction ideal that we figure out how to inscribe and write and utilize data in sort of like a pure energy electromagnetic constrained field inside like diamonds or something. I mean, it'd be nice, honestly. Will you gonna start working on that?
Yeah, probably not.
Where are the customers?
Where are the customers? Well, my next gig is going to be in longevity for sure. I think it's fascinating field, and I think we have more and more data to actually have a breakthroughs in this field. But yeah, I think data volumes are not necessarily a bad thing. But it's not about data volumes; it's about data variety, really. I wouldn't say like actually have big data is advantage, but actually have rich data, right? So this is where we should.
That's a really good point, actually, that I don't think anyone's brought up on the show before. I actually have a colleague that looked into the connections between networks, human networks, but I think it applies here that, as you said, it's not about the volume, the amount that you have, but there's some arbitrary aspect of the data that's like super critical here, which is the, say, connectivity, but also the sparseness of it. I don't think there's a metric for that, for what that is. Maybe you're calling it something special.
We call it interoperability. Maybe not the best word for that, but it means it's actually like for data assets like table, you can have different types of analysis, or for analysis, you can use like different assets to feed it in. So interoperability is ability to match different features between different sources in a way that is complementary.
Yeah. So, okay. So I have to ask about this. Some of the marketing for your company says that you don't have any hallucinations, and so we know that hallucinations are coupled to utilizing a straight transformer architecture. If you're using transformer architecture, you must have hallucinations. So you must be doing something special that other companies aren't utilizing. Different from what the LLMs are building. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, sure. So our approach is to ground a single source of truth in your knowledge graph, right? In your business ontology, which is transparent, right? As business ontology is represented as knowledge graph of semantic embeddings. So for starters, you already have kind of organizational agreement on what business logic is. And in addition to that, we actually ground your experience only to this business ontology. Right, so we reduce the degrees of freedom of the model not to think widely about universe, but to think about your company as a universe. So when you ask question about active users, it will not think about Wikipedia definition of active user. It will think about your business metric definition of active user, maybe coming from your BI tool. Right, so it's really grounding the experience of the users in the single source of truth of your organization. In addition, because we always build these ontologies based on the metadata, we understand the context much better. We do not only understand the context of user interaction within specific memory frame in the Copilot, we also understand the user interactions with any system which is connected to LMX. Right, so it's basically previous interactions with operational systems, with analytic systems. So our context is much wider, and we can have much more personalized experience for the user based on this metadata access. And the third reason is because, okay, so the first reason was the business ontology and single source of truth, grounding for experience. The second one is personalization. And the third one, because we do have business ontologies which are complementary, like in their language and so on and so forth. Before the customization for a specific company, when users use different language, which is different from the business metrics definitions in their organization, we can pick it up from our generic ontologies about this vertical, because people switch companies, they might use different lingo, different abbreviations,
Yeah, for sure.
which are not necessarily implemented in this company. And we have not only user context, but we also have industry context, so we can pick up this language. So those three reasons allow us to have much reduced experience on one side. On the other side, it's very, very personalized. So you cannot ask Illumex about weather. You can only ask Illumex about your connected data.
So you're not utilizing as much of a probabilistic model as other companies that have built their own foundational models.
We haven't built foundational models, but we use dozens of semantic models and 2 dozen of graph models for different tasks, from onboarding to the user experience and explainability, to provide this type of experience. And we always keep an eye on the latest and greatest. So we also, when the new models come out, we test them and see how we can embed it in our ensemble. And it helps us to, increase the accuracy over time. But I think the biggest thing is we give the ownership on the context and reasoning for the organizations that we serve. We automatically build it for them, and from now on, they're the owners of the context and reasoning. And if they want to plug tomorrow NVIDIA names or AWS Bedrock, they can use this context. So it's kind of, it's transparent and it's reusable. So for us, this is the biggest benefit, actually.
So there's still a chance that it will hallucinate. It's just very, very low, and it will stay within the context of the business domain.
No, it's not a hallucination. It's a guided spiritual journey.
Yeah, you mean if you do have many versions of truth? So, for example, Joanna has just introduced new definition of active user in your dashboard. Illumex picks it up, and if someone asks about active user, we might offer like, okay, there is new definition in your BI dashboard. Would you like to get answer on that?
Well, as long as there's a probability of how you generate a solution, the answer, there's always a chance for it to just make something up, even if you have tried to constrain it by actual definitions. Otherwise, that's just a fundamental aspect of probabilities. So, I mean, while you can definitely reduce it and eliminate duplicate definitions, there's a whole other part of the transformer architecture which fundamentally requires the creation of hallucinations. Like I don't think you can have a transformer architecture without that.
Again, it's a good point, and we provide explainability about the answers. So it's not like you're asking a question
Yeah, for sure.
and you have numbers and answer. We actually provide full explainability. Like this is how we understand the question. This is a semantic entity that we made this question to, and this is logic and all of that. And if user would like to base their answer on different logic, they can actually choose like this not autopilot mode and say, okay, this is the related semantic entities to a question. You can pick up from them if you'd
Makes
like to
sense.
really like. My husband, he drives Alfa Romeo Mito manual stick, right? So he will always prefer to have better control. We just back from Italy, so it's like those are the roads we created for manual driving. So it's like some data is created for manual selection, probably, right? If it's like super messy, you might want to select it manually. I would say, like, we'll, of course, as an industry, we are going to be more and more automated. Some people just like more control.
I think it's the idea of control more
Yeah,
so than
yeah.
actually in control. Like, you don't want the manual stick shift. You want to be told it's a
Yeah,
manual stick shift, but if you mess up and do the wrong thing, the right thing still happens.
that's true. That's true. There are always, yeah, we have systems like ABS and all of that to keep us safe. That's true.
So you want to shift the gears, but you don't want to dump the clutch.
Probably not. Not over Lake Como, like, 200 meters above the water. No, not really.
Right.
Not really.
Awesome. So feels like this might be a good place to roll into picks. What do you think?
Okay, let's
Right.
do it.
Warren,
Yeah.
you're never gonna guess what's happening next.
Oh, okay, I'm going first. Yeah, so I got a really controversial good one here.
Sweet.
There's yeah, like I like it. So there's this great article that I read through. It's short form, so it should be easy for anyone to get through. It's basically the idea of how intuition is being used in software engineering and whether or not LLMs are capable of intuition. And
Mhm.
it is actually a proof that shows we can't have AGI with transformer architecture. Our LLMs will never be able to reason. And it utilizes Gödel's incompleteness theorem, the non-computability of intuition, and the computability of Turing machines. And just with that, we can actually prove fundamentally that we can't have AGI with our current systems. We haven't gotten any closer to that. So don't listen to the lies that people have been sharing from massive quote unquote AI companies, because the real argument here is that in order for us to have AGI, you need to introduce intuition, and that's the exact thing that's lacking in Turing machines.
Okay, I
And
have a question to you. Are you
yeah,
born with intuition?
yeah. Well,
Uh,
there is
are you born
there.
with intuition? Just answer that. If you're
Yeah, I
not
mean,
born with intuition, it
Answer the
means
question, Warren.
yeah, it means
yeah.
it's experience, really.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's really hard to identify even what happens as an individual, let alone if we can believe it on an external system. Luckily, the Turing machines we know, are closed systems there. I likened it to this great quote, which will be a future pick of in a future episode, a parrot reciting Shakespeare. That's LLMs today, and you would never claim that a parrot, would fully understand, what it's reciting there. And that's unfortunately the extent of our technology. That's my pick.
All right, Ina, you're up. What did you bring for a pick?
Topic. Well, wasn't ready for that. But I must say, yeah. So let's speak about AGI as well. I do not believe in AGI in the next 5 to 10 years at least, due to the fact that we as humans we're capable of applying context from one experience to different experience. So I do not call it intuition because intuition to me is just experience, but our ability to merge contexts which are vividly not connected is where the human spark is. And to me, AGI is not going to be near that in foreseeable future, let's say 10 years. So think about you can apply your knowledge from cooking to your knowledge of right now, coding or something like that, like what's the ingredients and so on and so forth. So our associations work differently than machine association, and this context merge from unrelated experiences is something that machines are not good with.
I like how you went to the philosophy side of this. There's this idea that the universe is deterministic and that everything is connected through the collapse of Schrodinger's equation, the wave function. And
It's called religion, but yeah.
oh, I don't know. I was ready to go there.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do agree. Fundamentally, there is something missing from the computing systems that we build today in order to actually achieve AGI.
My pick's going to take this down a whole big notch because we were talking about having the number of tabs that you have open in your browser. For the last couple months, I've been using the Arc browser, and specific to that conversation, one of the things Arc does is any tab that you haven't touched in the last 30 days, it just closes it for you. And I used to have a bunch of tabs open, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to hate it. I'm going to figure out how to turn that feature off, or I'm going to quit using it. After several months, it's closed probably hundreds of tabs for me, and I've not noticed. So go try out the Arc browser. You don't need all those tabs.
I think I'm having a little bit of a neurological meltdown just at hearing about that feature. Will.
Right?
FOMO.
It's
FOMO.
panic inducing. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
I mean, there are tabs that I actually leave there that I know are there, and I don't want them to go away.
Cool. I have a follow-up question for you, Warren, though. You mentioned that you're currently wearing one IoT device and you're thinking about getting another one. What are you
Yeah.
wearing and what are you thinking about getting?
Yeah, so this isn't my pick, but I'm wearing the Google Pixel Watch 2. I would definitely not recommend anyone to get a smartwatch ever. So that's one. So I want a replacement. This thing disturbs me while I'm sleeping, and I would really like to get my sleep metrics. And so I've been looking into alternatives there. The number one is the Aura Ring. I think they're on edition 4, but it's a subscription-based thing, and that really rubs me the wrong way. So I'm not interested in that realistically. But that's what I'm hoping for, a good ring without a subscription to show up. That I think I'd be okay wearing to bed.
No, I was just curious. For my watch, I have a Garmin Phoenix, which is technically a smartwatch, but I have everything turned off on it. The only thing I use it for is heart rate and metrics whenever I'm out for a run. And I had an Aura Ring for a while, and same with you. It's like I don't want to pay a subscription for it. And I know a lot of people who use the Whoop band, but it's another subscription-based service. But they're like, just let me buy it and go on with my life. Is that cool with you? But trying to push updates out onto devices that people you don't have access to, like that's not a fun place to be. Even from like my days of supporting mobile apps, just trying to get people to update was frustrating. All right. Ina, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun.
Likewise. I really enjoyed the composite.
Warren, as always, thank you. Appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, of course.
And to all the listeners, thank you very, very much, because you're kind of the reason that we do this. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If not, you know how to find us and let us know. And we'll see you all next week.